Working with the Park Service in West Virginia, we often hosted a Scouts program. The Scouts spent many hours on volunteer projects, which was a great way for them to test themselves and earn their badges. A big part of their service involved helping to restore parks throughout the county. Our area was a favorite spot for them to visit, and they helped with trail maintenance and worked to improve the campgrounds in many different ways. Just clearing the area of trash and debris alone was a huge help. About 5 years ago, we were hosting a group like that, and I experienced something unexpected. The Scouts were between 10 and 12 years old. It was their last camp out of the year, and they were determined to make the most of it. They had worked hard all day, and some of their junior assistant leaders decided to organize a night game for them. The game was supposed to be a spooky adventure where the Scouts could relax and have some fun after a long day's work. The game involved the kids completing different tasks, while the junior leaders tried to surprise and scare them. Since I was new to the job, I wasn't sure if this type of game was common or not. It was close to Halloween, so they were likely getting into the spirit of the season. Earlier in the evening, another ranger and I had given a talk. Afterward, we were there to help guide the event and ensure everyone stayed within the safe boundaries of the park. Some of the junior leaders had put on monster masks and were hiding in the woods near the checkpoints that the Scouts had to pass through. They wanted to give the kids a fun and thrilling experience as they made their way through the tasks. I was moving between checkpoints, keeping an eye on everything. There was a stretch of forest near the upper boundary, and I decided to stay on a large rock there to make sure no one wandered too far. I kept my flashlight off so I wouldn't spoil the game. It was so dark that night, the kind of dark where your eyes can play tricks on you, making you think you see things that aren't really there. While sitting on the rock, I thought I saw a shadow about my size darting through the trees a couple of times. It was hard to see clearly, so I assumed it was just my imagination because nothing appeared when I turned my flashlight on. I had been there for a while, and it was getting quite late. I was sure the game would end soon, and everyone would gather around the campfire to make s'mores. Just as I was thinking this, I saw the shadow again. This time I could see a vague figure standing near a tree not too far away. I thought it might be one of the junior leaders hiding to scare the kids. Since it was almost time to head back, I decided to go over and check. I was still some distance away, but as I got closer, I aimed my flashlight toward the tree. There was definitely someone very tall standing there. When my light hit its face, I was surprised to see reflective red eyes staring back at me. I started to feel a strong sense of dread. Something felt very strange. I tried to ask if everything was okay, but then I noticed that this figure had huge black wings covering most of its body. My mind struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. I tried to convince myself that it was just someone in an elaborate costume, but deep down I knew that wasn't true. This thing wasn't human. Besides the red eyes, it didn't seem to have any facial features, just darkness. It was also taller than me by about a foot. It lifted its wings and made a terrible, piercing shriek. Then it jumped straight up into the tree behind it, where it could look down at me. It slowly turned its head back and forth, as if it was waiting for something else. I felt an urge to run. Something inside me screamed that it didn't matter if it was a prank. I felt an overwhelming fear. If it wasn't a prank, I knew I could be in real danger. I ran as fast as I could. I thought I heard it following me in the trees, but I didn't dare look back. When I finally reached the campfire, I saw that everyone else had already returned. They were laughing and joking, completely unaware of what I had just experienced. I went and found the other ranger, quickly telling him what had happened. He looked at me strangely, as if he thought I was making it all up. This ranger had worked there much longer than I had. He seemed to be looking at me like I was just a clueless newcomer who didn't know how to handle the woods. After that, I stopped talking about it and started to question if I had really seen what I thought I saw. Everyone else was having a good time, but my heart was still racing. I kept walking around the camp, shining my flashlight into the woods whenever I thought I heard a noise. Eventually, the party quieted down and everyone headed back to their tents for the night. I stayed by the fire for a long time, thinking that maybe I had chosen the wrong kind of job for myself. The next day, I went back to the area to check it out, But I never found anything unusual, just endless trees. Well, I did find a big black bird carcass, but that could have been from anything. It wasn't the first dead bird I had ever seen. Despite that frightening night, I stayed with the job. I did leave that area the next summer, though, and ended up working for the City Parks Department in New York City. There are plenty of unusual things in the city parks, too, but that's another story. I have a small farm in Townsend, Delaware, and on our farm, we raise chickens and grow corn to sell, and we have a cow for milk. We also have a medium-sized garden to feed our family. Our farm is in Newcastle County, about a half-hour drive from Battery Park. There are many farms in this area. For the past 6 months, something has been troubling our chickens, and I thought it might be a fox sneaking under the fence. Some mornings I would find only a pile of feathers, with no other signs of the chicken. Whatever was taking the chickens was carrying them off to eat somewhere else. We have a German Shepherd, but he is still quite young, so I don't fully trust him to roam around freely yet. At night, he usually stays in the house. On the night this happened, we had to keep him on the enclosed porch because he had eaten something that made him sick. It wasn't anything serious, but I didn't want him making a mess inside the house. So when my dog started barking and whining around 2 in the morning, I wasn't sure if he needed to go outside or if he saw something on the farm. Either way, I had to get up and take him out, so I decided to grab my rifle, hoping to catch the fox in the act. The first sign that something was wrong was how my dog was behaving. He stepped onto the grass, sniffed the air, and then whimpered, staying close to the house. Normally, he would race around with lots of energy, and I'd have to keep calling him back. But this time he just stayed near the house, did his business, and quickly ran back to the porch. I let him back in, thinking he was still feeling sick. After bringing him back inside, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. My dog's strange behavior wasn't like him at all. Usually he was fearless and full of energy, but tonight he seemed frightened and hesitant. I stood on the porch for a moment, looking out into the dark, trying to see or hear anything unusual. The night was quiet, too quiet. I decided to take a quick walk around the property, just to make sure everything was all right. While I was outside, I thought it would be a good idea to check on the hen house to make sure everything was okay. It's a bit of a walk from the house. As I made my way there, I heard the cow bellowing loudly, which was very unusual for her. This caught my attention, so I decided to stop by the barn first. When I checked on the cow, she seemed all right but was acting strangely. Her eyes were wide open, and she seemed nervous and twitchy. I carefully looked around to see if there was a snake nearby, since that can easily startle a cow. However, I didn't see anything alarming, so I left her alone and continued on to the chicken pen. As I got closer, I could hear the hens making a lot of noise, like they were upset about something. This was definitely unusual. I made sure my rifle was ready, just in case I needed it. There are lights around the pen, so it was pretty well lit up, and there are 2 buildings for the birds and a small shed where I keep their feed. From outside the pen, I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, but the chickens were clearly agitated, so I opened the gate and stepped inside to investigate further. As soon as I stepped inside the pen, a strong smell hit my nose. It was like the smell of sulfur you get when you light a match. For a moment I panicked, thinking there might be a fire somewhere, and the smell of sulfur always makes me think of fire. I wasn't even thinking about the fox anymore. I was just trying to figure out where the smell was coming from. Then I heard one of the hens squawk loudly, but it was suddenly cut off. The sound came from behind the feed shed. I froze for a moment, realizing that something had just attacked one of my hens. I moved cautiously toward the shed, my rifle ready, and peeked around the corner. What I saw shocked me so much that I almost dropped my gun. There, crouched low over the hen it had caught, was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was as big as a large calf, with a goat's head, curved horns, and wings on its back. It looked like something straight out of a storybook. I stood there, completely frozen, forgetting all about the rifle in my hand. The creature looked up at me, and I tell you, it seemed so evil. Its eyes glowed yellow, and its head was all bony and ridged. It was holding the dead hen in its small front legs, just like you see on a T-Rex, but skinny with sharp talons. Then the creature screeched at me, and the sound was terrifying. It was like a mix between the angry squawk of a giant bird and the scream of a cougar. I stumbled backward and fell on the ground, dropping my gun. I scrambled to my feet as fast as I could, terrified that the creature might attack me. I grabbed my rifle and started shooting wildly, not even taking time to aim properly. The creature took off into the air. It actually flew. Its giant bat-like wings unfolded, and it soared away, carrying the hen with it. As it flew, I could see its legs, bent like a horse's, and it had a skinny tail that whipped behind it. It didn't fly very high, maybe it couldn't, reaching about 15 feet up before flying straight away from me. I fired at it once more, but I know I missed. I didn't really have much of a chance, especially after falling on the ground like that. The next morning, I went outside to see if I could find any evidence of what I had seen. There were signs of a struggle behind the shed, and I spotted some tracks in the dirt that looked like they could be hooves, but because it had been dry, the tracks weren't very clear. I took some pictures, but when I looked at them later, it was hard to make out anything definite. I've decided that I'm going to get one of those hunter's cameras with night vision that's motion activated. I'll set it up in the chicken pen, and maybe I'll be lucky enough to capture a picture of whatever it was I saw. If I manage to get a picture, I'll definitely send it to you. Then I'll finally have some proof that there's something strange going on out here in Delaware farm country. My spouse surprised me with a trip to France, and I was so excited. We had talked about going there since we started dating, but things kept getting in the way. My spouse's mom got sick and had to live with us until she passed away. Then my spouse got sick too. It was a sad time, but my spouse said before she died, she wanted us to go to France together, and I was thrilled. It was something we had always dreamed of, but I never thought it would actually happen. Our trip to France was amazing, but something happened that I'll never forget. We were having a wonderful time exploring the countryside. Then one day, my spouse wasn't feeling well, so she decided to stay in bed while I went out on a boat ride alone. I wanted to see the beautiful sights around me. That day was something straight out of a movie, I'm telling you. I don't usually believe in crazy stuff, but what happened was unbelievable. I was out on the water, minding my own business, when I spotted these gigantic sea serpent-looking creatures swimming beside me. I couldn't believe my eyes. Their bodies were huge, with scales that shimmered in the sunlight. They stretched down deep into the water, disappearing into the unknown depths below, and their teeth. Oh boy, those teeth were sharp enough to cut through steel. I tried to stay calm and quiet as they glided past me, but I was shaking with fear inside. The sound they made was like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was a hissing noise that sent shivers down my spine. I've been bitten by snakes before, but these creatures could have swallowed me whole. Their skin had a deep green color, like the algae you see in ponds, mixed with shades of blue and gray, and their scales, they looked like they had been through some serious battles. Every movement they made created whirlpools in the water, pulling everything towards them. It was a moment I'll never forget, and it made me realize just how mysterious and incredible the world can be. The most surprising and strange thing about these creatures is how they moved together. It was as if they were all connected, even though there were many heads and bodies, and whenever they swam, the water around them seemed to swirl and bubble. It was really strange. I felt like hiding in my boat, but I couldn't stop watching. These sea serpent creatures were like something from a scary dream. One thing I know for sure, I won't be going on another boat ride anytime soon. When I told my spouse about it later, they were too sick to really listen. They just nodded and went back to sleep. After that strange encounter, I couldn't get those creatures out of my mind. I kept wondering, what in the world were they? I felt a strong need to learn more. I decided to chat with some local folks, hoping they might have some answers, and they shared stories about river monsters and mysterious creatures. Some said it was just a tale, but others insisted they had seen similar things too. Once the initial shock faded, I did what anyone would do. I turned to my laptop for answers. That's when I stumbled upon stories of sea serpents, like the ones sailors talked about, and legends of mythical creatures like the Greek Hydra. I even found mentions of something called the Delaware River Monster, which was close to where I had my boat ride. Can you believe it? I sure couldn't. While everyone knows about sea serpents, I had no clue about creatures like the Hydra, the Delaware River Monster, or this Japanese one called Orochi. The surprising thing about them? They're all one creature with many heads. When I saw a picture of the Delaware River Monster, my heart just dropped. It was hard to believe such a thing existed, but I saw it with my own eyes. The strangest part about these serpent creatures was how they moved together, and after reading about them, it all started to make sense. They weren't separate beings moving as one. They were all part of a single massive creature. I have to admit, I'm really thankful those sea serpent creatures didn't harm me. I was terrified when I saw them, but now that I look back, it's like, whoa, I could have been in serious trouble. I guess I should consider myself lucky to have escaped unharmed. You know, it used to bother my spouse a lot when I talked about seeing that creature. She always thought it was probably just a bunch of snakes or something, but I think deep down, she wished she could have seen it too. She was a good woman, may she rest in peace. I miss her every single day. But let me tell you, I'm grateful we went to France before everything happened. That trip was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. Besides seeing the snake-like creature, it was such a beautiful experience. Seeing that beast was terrifying, but it also felt like a huge adventure, you know? It makes you wonder what else is out there in the world that we haven't discovered yet. It's really exciting when you think about it. Seeing something like that really puts things into perspective. It makes you realize how tiny we are in the grand scheme of things. It's kind of silly to think we know everything about the universe, because we definitely don't. That experience made me realize that, and it's something I'll never forget. I decided to make a big change and move to Texas, and it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. But one night after I got here, something happened that really surprised me. I spotted a local bar that looked interesting and thought it might help me relax after all the stress of moving and the tough stuff I was leaving behind. After I sat down and ordered a drink, a friendly man in a fancy red suit joined me. Now, I usually don't click with people who seem so serious, being a hardworking guy myself, but I couldn't ignore how charming and likable he was from the start. We ended up having a lot of drinks together, and I found myself telling him all about the tough times that led me to move here. It was surprising how quickly and completely I opened up to him. Normally, I'm pretty reserved, but then I started to wonder if something was wrong with this situation. Was he trying to steal from me? Or maybe he was trying to distract me? Or even worse, was he trying to harm me? But whenever I started feeling suspicious, he'd say something funny that made me laugh. It was strange because at that time, nothing could make me laugh or feel happy. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it, but our talk got deeper and deeper. He started asking me about things like souls, energy, and if I believed in God. Then he brought up something really serious. He asked if I believed in a place called hell. After that, he asked me a big question. Would I give up part of myself for great riches, power, and success? I told him that I think everyone does that a little bit, otherwise we wouldn't have jobs. Then he asked if I would give up part of myself to make all my biggest wishes come true. I thought about it for a while and said maybe. Next, he asked if I would trade part of myself for knowledge and experiences that are usually off limits. After a while, things got really strange. The man's whole attitude shifted, and he stared at me with a gleam in his eyes, like he had something important to say. He wanted to know what I'd give if he could make the pain I was running from disappear. Feeling embarrassed for spilling my deepest secret to a stranger, I tried to leave, but he stood in my way. He seemed like a different person now. Then he asked if I'd trade my soul to keep my loved ones safe from getting hurt. I was filled with all sorts of feelings, and with all the drinks I had, I took a swing at him. But surprise, my fist just went through him and I ended up hitting the brick wall so hard that I broke my hand. Suddenly, the bartender was throwing me out, warning me about calling the cops. My hand was throbbing and the man I'd been talking to was nowhere to be seen. I can guess what you might be thinking. Maybe I drank too much, got into a fight, and imagined everything. But let me tell you, it shook me up so much that I, someone who never believed in anything spooky, started going to church every Sunday, reading my Bible every day, and praying for protection and guidance without fail. I am absolutely certain that the man was a demon trying to snatch my soul. He saw that I was in a tough spot. He knew I was feeling weak and vulnerable. It was the worst moment of my entire life. Listen up. That's when he strikes. Not when everything is going great. Not when you're being awesome. Not when you're doing the right thing. He shows up when you're feeling weak. Would I have handed my soul over to the devil that night? Maybe if he had been more patient and asked me differently, I might have said yes. This idea keeps me awake at night, and I can still picture him standing by the door, not the friendly guy from the bar anymore. His eyes were black. His skin was gray. It wasn't a dream. It was the most real thing I've ever experienced. It made me understand that we're all just pawns in the battle between good and evil. Having free will is great, but thinking we have total control is a lie. It was a scary experience, but I learned a bunch from it. I saw how easily we can be tricked and deceived. The devil in the bar was so good at talking, so charming. I was this close to falling for his tricks. It's chilling to know that there are creatures out there who want nothing more than to trick us and ruin the goodness inside us. Working for the European Space Agency, ESA, for over 12 years has been quite the journey. Some folks might not believe me when I say that, and that's okay. I understand doubts because I'm a bit of a doubter myself. During these years, I've learned a lot about space. It might seem like this big, mysterious place, but really it's not as mysterious as some might think. It's mostly just rocks, dust, planets, and stars. Nothing too crazy. You see, when you're around space stuff for a while, you start to realize that a lot of those wild stories you hear aren't true. Like those tales about NASA being up to no good or aliens visiting us from Mars. They're just stories, nothing more. But there's this one story that's different. It's about Mars, our red neighbor in the sky, and maybe I should have paid more attention to those wild tales after all. Back in 2022, something surprising happened. We found something inside one of Mars's moons, Phobos. The Mars Express orbiter had been cruising around for years before I joined the ESA, and its job was to check out Mars and the things around it using cool tools like cameras and stuff to take pictures and figure things out. We recently upgraded its gear, which helped us peek deeper into Phobos, and let me tell you, we found something we didn't expect. Underneath Phobos' surface, there were structures. Yeah, like rooms with walls and hallways and even stairs. It was mind-blowing. We were like, whoa, what's going on here? Now, if you don't know much about Mars's moons, Phobos and Deimos, let me give you a quick rundown. They're tiny, way smaller than our moon, and they don't look smooth like our moon either. They're all bumpy and odd-shaped. People used to think they were just big space rocks, leftovers from some ancient collision with Mars. But boy, were we wrong. When my team and I looked at those pictures of Phobos' insides, we realized something jaw-dropping. Phobos wasn't a rock at all. It was a spaceship. We were so excited about our discovery, but our bosses didn't seem as thrilled, so they buried our report and told us to keep quiet. They even got rid of any evidence that supported our findings. We wanted to tell everyone, but one of our team members vanished. That freaked us out, and we got scared to speak up. I mean, who wouldn't be? But things got even weirder. The ESA started cutting us out of the picture, like we never even existed. They said we were too distracting and might mess up future missions to Mars's moons. By 2024, I knew I had to do something. I tried to get back those pictures, but I failed. However, I stumbled upon something else, more pictures we weren't supposed to see. These pictures showed something shocking, the remains of small alien-like beings. They were dead, lying there in those hidden chambers beneath Phobos. It was proof of alien life. We could have shared this incredible discovery with the world, but instead, the ESA wanted to keep it hush-hush. Now they're teaming up with Japan to explore Phobos even more. Mark my words, they're going to find more secrets, and I bet you they're going to bring back evidence of extraterrestrial life. Believe me, this story is just beginning.